This episode is being released on my guest's birthday. Happy birthday, Jay. Hope it's a great one. Well, welcome. I'm Jason Demas Lawrence. This is Before the Stream, my podcast in which a guest and I check in on an album that we knew well in our past and discuss what memories the music triggers, how we listened to it then, how we listen now, what's changed in the world, and what's changed in us. Today we are talking about the Blue Album, the eponymous debut album by Weezer. It was released on May 10th, 1994 by Geffen Records. May 10th, 1994 was the same day that Nelson Mandela was sworn in as president of South Africa. Movies in the theater in May 1994 were When a Man Loves a Woman, Meg Ryan and Andy Garcia, Philip Seymour Hoffman. With Honors, with Brendan Fraser. Wow, he was big. Surviving the Game, Backbeat, and The Crow. Top songs were The Sign by Ace of Base and Bump and Grind by R. Kelly. My guest is a good friend of mine, collaborator, bandmate, someone who encouraged me in this endeavor from the beginning. Been waiting to have him on, been excited to have him on. He's been known as an actor, probably best known as a singer-songwriter, composer, guitarist, pianist, keyboardist. He plays everything. He'll soon be releasing his 5th full-length studio album. If you want to destroy his sweater, well, you're a creep. Don't do that. He looks just like Buddy Holly if Buddy Holly lost the glasses and became a handsome leading man kind of guy. His name's not Jonas. It's not JBM. It's Jesse Marchant. Jesse, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jay. That was a big year, big time.
Yeah, it was for me. And you're a little bit younger than me, but I'm sure it was a formative time for you as well.
Yeah, it was 94, he said, right?
Yeah, May 10th, 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Was that when you started high school?
I was born in 81, so I was 13 then. And I was in high school. That a lot of that period is quite a blur for me. And I don't think I came to the record right at that time because I looked this up when I was preparing for this, and the Nirvana stuff came out, like Nevermind came out before then.
Yeah.
And then I think the Unplugged record came out in 94.
Yep.
So I was really heavy into that. And then I think I came to the Weezer record after it came out. And 95 was a bad year for me. My father was sick and he passed away that year. So I'm pretty sure I came to the Weezer record maybe in 96 or something. And I think there was a levity to it that was different than what I usually listen to or what had been listening to in the years prior.
Yeah.
That probably attracted me to it because I think that's what I was trying to figure this out. Because when I listened through to it, it still stood up as a really cool sounding record, and the songs are melodic, and I still like a lot of it.
Yeah.
But I was trying to figure out what it was at the time that drew me to it because I was looking at the dates because I was really into hip hop too, and Tupac and B.I.G. So like Ready to Die came out in 94. So I was listening to that when it came out. I remember that.
Right.
So this was kind of in there in the mix with all of that stuff. Kind of a weird thing to be listening to simultaneously, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. Eclectic.
It fit well with the band I had going at the time with my cousin and my friend Tim, the bass player.
Really? What was that band called?
I think we had several names, but the one we settled on in the end was Blue Slip, which was, I mean, it's so corny. It was like that was the slip they would give you when you were late for school, or if you had done something wrong. It was like a slip to go to the principal's office. Very edgy.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty softcore punk. In our defense, I think we came up with it probably when we were 12 or something.
Right.
So, I guess there was still some growing to do in that area.
Was it a rock band? Was it hip hop influenced?
No, it was mostly guitar stuff. It was like, I don't remember when the Green Day records came out, but we were playing covers of Green Day and Weezer and Rancid.
Yeah.
Smashing Pumpkin songs.
Of course.
And I remember actually the thing that occurred to me when I listened back to this record was how much it's all basically the same sound. Like every song sounds the same.
Yeah.
The guitar sounds are all the same.
Right.
And it's, you know, it's like an overdrive. It's overdrive with fuzz. I think I read up that it was like a Mesa Boogie that they were using mostly, just jacked. But it's a great, cool sound. And like it was a fuzz sound that I was always trying to get, because I bought that. Remember the Boss, the silver fuzz? I forget the name of it, but it was silver.
Yeah. Not the Metal Zone.
And not the Metal Zone. It was actually like, it had the word fuzz in it.
Oh, right. Okay.
It was called the Super Fuzz or something like that. I can't remember. But it did that crazy Billy Corgan fuzz thing where it was just like full on, right? And to the point where if you couldn't play open chords on it, you could only play power chords, because any open string, it would just turn it too crazy, and you lost the note.
Right. So
that was the only pedal I had for overdrive, and I was trying to get the Weezer sound from that, and it wasn't working. So it was like, that was a big thing, trying to figure out how to get those tones, and like I worked a long time on that in the band.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised, knowing where you've gone with tone and the great care you take with it. I think I was kind of doing the same thing. I was playing a lot of drums, but I was playing guitar too, and I was trying to mimic these records, and I think I just found something that would work, and then I just wanted to play, and I wasn't overly concerned with sound, or my ear wasn't really that discerning.
Yeah.
And I just wanted something loud and crunchy, and
yeah.
I also wasn't playing shows, so I wasn't putting it out in front of people and having them give me a thumbs down or boo me or something. I think I had kind of the same experience with the record, where I don't know when I would have started listening for when a record sounded samey from a production standpoint, song to song. Maybe subconsciously I kind of recognized that. Like if I hadn't listened to it for many years and I thought back on it now, I probably would have some idea in my head that there weren't massive tonal shifts. But it was striking listening to it now that they seem to sort of set their sounds, and I'm sure they put a lot of time into getting their sounds, but it doesn't seem like they really took a lot of care to change things from song to song, or depending on the song.
Yeah, I mean, they did that thing that is very appealing when you're a teenager, to have parts and songs here and there that were dry.
Right.
Clean and dry. And then they kick on the distortion pedal in the chorus. And when I was a teenager, that was hugely gratifying. and you would turn it on and you would get the drive, but you would also like jack the volume so loud that it was like 10 times louder than the signal you had when it was clean. So that just did something for me, and there was a lot of that happening at the time. It still happens, I guess, in rock, but that was the in for me with it was with Say It Ain't So, actually.
Yeah,
because I think the first thing I saw of them was the Buddy Holly video, and I realized that I liked the melody and I liked the vibe of it, but the video was cool, but it was campy, and I wasn't really into that kind of thing at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about Happy Days because it just wasn't in my household, or it just wasn't around. I didn't know what it was, so the joke was kind of lost on me.
Right.
So that song got caught in my head, but then when I heard Say It Ain't So, and it was probably again through a music video because I don't think I had the record yet, but that song just blew my mind. Like I loved it so much, and I worked a long time to get all the parts right on that one, because it combined a strum with the pick and then some picking in between.
Yeah.
And I was used to finger picking because I was good at that because I was taking the classical lessons, but I wasn't really used to doing that stuff with a pick. And then there was, how it went into the solo in the end and everything. It's just so cool. And then the singing too. Like I remember when he does the bubbling, the bubble, that.
yeah.
I mean, it's just so everything is cool about that song. I love that song so much, and I still really like it. Last night I was getting ready for this, and I watched them doing it like in 2000, like recently. And the performance did not age well. It's like it's a kind of performance that just doesn't do well when it's like a multi-million-dollar rock band with stage lights and everything. I don't know. I was unmoved.
I'm sure. Yeah, I didn't watch anything more recently. I'm sure we'll get into talking about their career trajectory because it feels unparalleled in terms of other bands that I've ever been into. I mean, I'll wait to get into that shit talking there.
Yeah.
I agree about Say It Ain't So, and that video in particular. It feels like it has some of everything, especially for that formative age.
Yeah.
Because also in the video, they're just in a room together. I think it was their rehearsal space at the time.
Yeah.
It just felt like exactly what I wanted to do. Like, just get in a room with the band I was in and just play and not have any pretense about it. And those rock out parts were so gratifying.
Yeah.
And yeah, the vocal parts have really quite a range from quiet parts to nerdy dude, soulful parts.
Yeah.
To totally going for it in a punk screamy kind of way. Yeah, that one seemed to have everything. My first experience with them, I think, was when it first came out. Yeah, 94 was my freshman year in high school, and the Sweater Song started getting played on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this experience with several bands back then where when I first heard the hit song, I hated them. And then after a few more listens, I was a big fan. It's like I had no integrity about it or something. But I think it was the same experience with them where I was listening to Pearl Jam and Nirvana, and it felt like I was listening to serious music. There's something like that where Nirvana songs are about pain and trauma and, you know, kind of same thing for Pearl Jam. There was no silliness or playfulness in it. So then hearing the Sweater Song, hearing someone talking about like this cartoonish unraveling of a sweater, and it seemed like he was like kind of a nerdy guy. I think I couldn't process if it was a joke or how to interpret it. And then I heard the song a few more times and it was catchy, and I bought the tape, and I do remember that they came early on, probably that freshman year or maybe the summer after my freshman year, and I really only knew the Sweater Song, and some of my friends went to the show, and I didn't go because I was, no, that's dumb, man. And I think they pretty much just played the whole first album. I really wish I'd gone to that show because I was a big fan within a few months after that. And yeah, I was listening to it over and over. I did end up seeing them in 96, I think, after Pinkerton came out, and remember that being a really good show.
Yeah, I wonder how it would have been. I didn't end up seeing them live. I watched their Letterman performance from 94 or 95 last night too. And it was not as tight as the record.
No.
It was loose. I mean, it was loose, too loose for me.
Yeah.
It felt kind of sloppy. It was, but they were going for it, you know. Like Matt Sharp had his stance going, you know, and he was like really emphatically hitting the bass notes in the chorus. They were playing Satan, so you know, Cuomo had his thing going. He was cool. Like he had a confidence with how he did it. So that went a long way.
Yeah, just trying to remember the shows that I saw back then, like Smashing Pumpkins and Nine Inch Nails and these really loud MTV alternative rock bands. I think that did go a long way, just the energy of it all.
It was almost all energy. I remember the Pumpkins actually was disappointing because I saw them. I was into Siamese Dream, and I was actually into the other stuff too, like Melancholy, and
yeah, me too.
A lot of those songs I learned how to play and sing and stuff. And I remember it was a big deal to go see them, and they were playing at the Forum, like the big the arena. And I was disappointed because it was just, first of all, it was like one of those shows where it's so loud that the sound is incomprehensible, where you literally just can't understand what's coming at you.
Right.
And then you added to that like Billy Corrigan was, you know, he would scream anyway when he records, but it was just, he was just yelling into the mic the whole time, and it was the fuzz and the yelling, and it was almost like it was so full on level 10 or 11 that it was just never, it lost its effect.
Yeah.
And I guess there was never a break from the fuzz. It was just the wall, you know?
Yeah.
So I think I understood at that point what dynamics were about and how you lost the effect if it was just always on.
Yeah. Good for you. I think it took me longer to figure that out because I saw them in 94, 95 during the Siamese Dream run as well. And I loved it. I have the same memory, but I loved it. I was super caught up in it, and it was a big general admission place.
Yeah.
Was your place general admission, or were you sitting?
It was probably seated, and that's the other thing. I was like, I think I was way back, and probably in I was near the nosebleeds, and it was, the sound was probably just shit where I was.
It makes such a huge difference to be physically affected by the sound versus sitting farther back and listening in a less affecting or more coherent or less affecting of your whole body kind of way. Because I remember like the song Silverfuck, and we're on to a different album now, but we'll get back to Weezer.
Well, it's like all these ones that came at this time, so it's hard to just stick on one.
It's true because the effect is the same from whether it's today smashing in with the fuzz after the intro, or one of these songs like Say It Ain't So, or one of the ones that gets huge in the chorus. Just the flashes that I remember from that early Smashing Pumpkins concert were songs like Silverfuck, where it would drop down to where it was just bass and quiet drums, and knowing that it's coming again, that they're about to and just being in this wave of people that would freak out, and you're feeling the kick drum in your chest, and people aren't really moshing, but you're in a wave of people that's very affecting. And I don't think there was actually a way to listen and evaluate how they were playing while you're experiencing that. You're just caught up in it all.
Well, yeah, and when you know the song, the anticipation is tantalizing. I mean, you know it's coming.
Right. Yeah, it's also just a younger person's game, I think. I still like this Weezer album, but it's hard for me to not think of it in terms of being in high school.
Yeah.
It takes me back to a time. It doesn't really age with me. I mean, I'm listening to things differently because I'm older. I have more experience with recording, being a musician. But I still, my enjoyment of this record has to go back to how I enjoyed it when I was a teenager.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, some people's musical taste becomes arguably more sophisticated as they get older.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what happened with growing out of that. You go revisit it and you realize that it's catchy and it sounds great. And the songs they feel good, you know?
Yeah.
But it's, the lyrics are kind of funny. They're self-deprecating, but they're juvenile.
Right.
And, you kind of have to suspend disbelief a little bit to still enjoy that as a 40-year-old person, you know? And I guess there is the nostalgia element too, though.
Yep.
That comes up a little bit for me when I listen to it. And I did revisit it, I remember, about 10 years ago or something. It's not something I ever put on. Just wanted to see how it held up. And I was going through the work of Chris Shaw, what he had done, the engineer, because I like the way his records sound. Yeah. And I forgot that he was the one who engineered that. And it actually does sound still like a record that he would have made recently. It's sonically pretty full.
Yeah.
Nice. The frequencies are good.
Yeah. What are the other records that he's worked on?
He's done, he's like mixed vocal records. He's recorded some too.
Yeah.
He did the most recent Bob Dylan record.
Oh, cool.
A few Bob Dylan records. He just does it's just really full spectrum sound, and it's always bright and clear, but it's never too bright. And I was reading actually about this record that they had a much darker sound in their demo tapes, and he was playing in the neck pickup, and then Rick Ocasek, the producer, encouraged them. This is in the Wikipedia page, actually. He said he encouraged them to use a brighter sound and to switch to the bridge pickup.
Wow. Okay. I read through the Wikipedia,
which is good. I mean, because
that.
it's not, but it's not. It doesn't. The guitars are not bright at all.
Right.
They're like, they're fuzzy and clear, and but they're still fat, you know. And I think what they did is that they used the bass guitar and was it Matt Sharp? He was playing. They were basically playing root notes in the same picking patterns.
Right.
So they were fusing the bass with overdrive to the guitars with drive, and it was creating like that thicker one instrument kind of sound.
Yeah, definitely.
So it still sounds good.
Yeah, it does.
I love that opening of The World Has Turned.
I know.
So cool.
I still love the drumming on this record. There was a period of time where I didn't listen to it for a long time, but it's stuck in my mind that it was a great drum performance on this album.
Yeah.
And I felt the same going back to it. Patrick Wilson is his name.
Yes.
There's nothing too flashy about it, but it feels like a deep pocket. The kick drum is quite loud.
Yeah.
I notice going back, it feels like it sticks out from the rest of the kit in a way that I wouldn't expect from such a big record. And it feels heavy, like weighted down, but it really works in terms of groove. Like just for this record, I don't think it would hold up as well if it sounded more punky or it didn't groove as hard as I feel like it does.
I think that's why it fit in well with all the other stuff. I was listening to hip hop at the time. It had that groove. It still had a bit of a sexiness to the beat.
Yeah.
Like that song in particular, it's soulful.
It is. Yeah.
And so you know, a lot of the songs are actually soulfully done, Only in Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a heart to it in terms of how it's played and how it feels musically.
Yeah, even the Sweater song, that intro is pretty iconic, and it's just the simplest thing you could think to do.
Yeah.
I remember being struck as a young person just learning to play drums at that time, thinking, why would you do that? It's almost too easy of a thing to do to start a song, and of course it isn't. I mean, it sets a mood, and there's a million different ways to play that simple little fill, and if it's not right in the pocket, it's not going to have the same effect that it does. So it's still very enjoyable from a drum standpoint. I was also listening recently, struck by the fact that he's not hitting as hard as I expected or imagined back then. These records are loud and squashed to some extent, I'm sure, and the guitars are really loud, and so just listening to it as a sort of wall of sound, I imagined the drummer just hitting as hard as he can.
Yeah.
And listening back now, it's like, nope. I wish I had understood that as a kid, so that I wouldn't have been trying to hit as hard as I could instead of
there's no understanding at that age
out of the drums or something.
You equate the size of the sound with the intensity of the performance. So if it sounds urgent and big, it's because the guy is laying into it hard, and you know, and he's feeling the angst. But yeah, Patrick Wilson he has a pretty laid back vibe. If you watch the videos, he's always got that like sense of humor where he looks like he's taking a piss, you know? Yeah.
I think once the switch flipped for me and I realized that it was okay to sort of laugh at them, or that was kind of the image that they had, that they were down to earth, sort of nerdy guys with their own insecurities, then it was hilarious to watch the Sweater Song video with him just air drumming and standing up and walking around, and the dogs coming out and totally taking a piss on the whole music video thing.
Yeah, the colors in that video are so beautiful. There was Spike Jonze. I had forgotten about that video actually, and then I guess that's the problem, is that they became so aware that was their thing, and then they just went to hell with it. Like the whole thing, it just became, everything's a joke, and everything's self-referential. And I mean, I did not follow what came after Pinkerton. I watched the video for it, like they did that cover of Africa, and even that is self-referential. It's like they got Weird Al to do it, but it's them just redoing the video for the Sweater Song.
Yeah.
And then the albums are, they're redoing the Blue Album cover in different colors. It's just so, I don't know. It became to me like a band that's just not. It's not even that they're not serious. It's just that they are unapologetically just aware that was their moment and that they had no ambition to really go past it, just to keep in that world and to make the joke bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's kind of weird. I don't know. I guess I don't really understand the psychology of it or the intention of it. So I don't quite get what's happened.
I feel exactly the same. It feels almost aggressive, or as if you're daring people to still like you, or calling them stupid for still liking you somehow, because I just can't. The lack of ambition is the thing. It doesn't seem congruous with how I knew them, because this band has been going on for so long. This is 1994 that this album came out, and Pinkerton was 1996, and there was progress between those two albums. And Rivers really seemed like an important voice in rock and roll at the time. Pinkerton is much more raw, and it feels a little more honest in a way, or direct somehow. And then all of a sudden it just became some sort of pop joke.
I mean, it might have been this like a resentment of fame and and then a resentment of lack thereof, because I know that Pinkerton was not well received critically, and I think at the time that came out, and then also I don't think it did well, at least not immediately. So I don't know. I think the fragility of a band trajectory is so it's such a real thing anyway. That if the front man doesn't have his vision for his expression throughout his life on lock, then it's just going to get derailed. Especially after such a huge success.
Right. But it seems like he could have more of a vision. I read that early on, maybe before Pinkerton, he had an idea for like a rock opera kind of album or project, and he was writing songs for more of a production thing, and that got scrapped and ended up being Pinkerton. But it didn't seem like he had no vision, and he just wrote some songs and got famous, and then didn't like stardom, because also they don't have to keep putting out albums. They've put out like 11 or 12 studio albums at this point. They're churning them out. I don't know what their financial situation is, but I feel certain they could not put out as many albums, or they could put out whatever they want to record and still go headline Lollapalooza or the Vans tour or whatever it is, and play songs from their first couple of albums and be fine. It just seems like a strange thing. I hadn't listened to anything from like maybe the fourth album on, maybe even the third album on, and in the last few days, just out of curiosity, because of I've talked shit over the years. It was so shocking that they put out an album called Hurley with the character from Lost named Hurley, with the actor, his face on the cover as the character of Hurley, which in a way is like the most ridiculous thing you could ever think to do.
So what was behind that? I don't actually know the backstory of that.
I don't know either. I just can't believe that they did it. A band that I once took seriously.
Don't you find that a lot of bands, though, that you listen to from that era, you thought they were serious and that they turned out not to be?
Yes.
I felt like that happened all the time. I mean, and in retrospect, like they were only semi-serious, and maybe you were trying to convince yourself that they were more. I remember so many bands like that. It was like one or two records, and then it was over.
Right. But it hasn't been over for Weezer.
Well, I don't mean over in terms of their being able to get around on the circuit. I just mean over in the sense that like you don't rely on them to put out anything good.
Of course. And
or anything that you'll connect with.
right. Some of it is just getting older as a listener myself. But, Weezer and Green Day are two bands that come to mind that were huge at that time in the mid-90s that have continued on at a high visible level with new music.
Mm-hmm.
Green Day's interesting because they seem to like really fall off with our generation, and then American Idiot seemed to hit a totally new generation of listeners. It seemed to me like they exploded again.
Is that what happened with them?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard American Idiot all the way through or much of it at all. I just fell off and stayed off. But it seemed to me like they got huge again with kind of the next generation. And I was never really clear if those people knew much about Dookie or if it was starting new for them with American Idiot. With Weezer, it doesn't seem like they've had any major album hits. Like, I think anyone that's a fan of Weezer now, those first couple albums are important to them, but it does still feel like the fandom is immediate in that people are still paying attention to the new albums coming out versus like Bush, who, if they go play, it's going to be people our age there that want to hear the first album or the first two albums, and nothing hit with a next generation or reintroduce them in some way. So it feels like most bands from that time, it's stuff like that where it's just pure nostalgia for people. But Green Day, and maybe that's past now, but it's definitely been more recent with Green Day and Weezer. It feels like they still have people hanging on the new material.
Yeah. I think you mean Bush X, right?
Did they change?
Well, I don't know if that was just in Canada, but I remember there was some kind of lawsuit thing, and their records in Canada were released as Bush X.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I
might be misremembering this, but I'm almost certain.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Was it like Bush Beer or something?
I know there was another band. It was always that thing where like a band would get famous, and it turned out that there was some band who had put out like a cassette tape somewhere, and they're like looking for an easy way to sue.
Yeah.
And then they'd have to change their name. Like, fuck these fucking guys, man. Like, and they just let us have it.
Before the internet, how would you even figure that out if there's a band that had that name?
Yeah, I mean, just see them on the marquee, and some guy comes up to you while you're selling merch, and it's like, yo, dude.
we put out the tape and copyrighted it in 92.
Yeah.
Back then, it would have been good business to just make a tape of every band name you could think of and sell it for $1 million. Lyrically, thinking back to this album and how it feels juvenile, the second song, No One Else, not one of my favorite songs on the record.
Oof, yeah, lyrically embarrassing too.
But I remember feeling that at the time in high school.
Yeah, me too. And I was trying to find ways to interpret it differently, like it was sarcastic or a joke or something, because I was always particularly sensitive to chauvinism as a kid, because I think just for whatever reason, it was maybe a little bit in my nature, but so many women in my household had an older sister,
right,
and I just didn't roll with any of that shit.
Right.
And so that song, I was like, this is fucking stupid. What is this? What is he talking about? It was like controlling and I did not like the vibe of that one. So I was trying to find ways to make excuses for it, I think.
Yeah.
What's your interpretation of it now when you read it? I was rereading these lyrics yesterday.
I think my way of not making it just chauvinistic like that is that it illuminates the speaker's own insecurity.
Yeah, of course.
It felt so much like a high school relationship where I was like jealous in those relationships in an irrational, ridiculous kind of way. Like, oh, hey, were you talking to Bobby? Or
I think that actually probably is what it is. I think it's self-deprecating.
yeah,
I think it is because it ties in with other themes on the record where it's like he's embarrassed,
right.
and he's sharing it.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully that's the case.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, there was more evidence, like on Pinkerton, where he's like falling in love with the 18-year-old from Japan, and
Right.
it's hard to it's hard to tell if it's. I don't know anything about his personal life.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell if it's poking fun at himself, or if it's innocent or not.
Right. Either way, it doesn't ask for much interpretation, but either way, it's a very high school feeling for me, a very juvenile feeling.
Yeah.
Whether you want the girl to be loyal to you to a fault, or you're making a satirical statement, it does illuminate the speaker's own insecurities, because that's not a healthy relationship.
Right.
And that's not a realistic way to feel. So listening back now, it did feel like it captured something, like a mindset that I cannot relate to now.
Yeah.
But I think in high school I maybe understood that mindset more.
I guess it's all really alienation, all of it really, because in the garage,
Yeah.
only in dreams is like, I guess it's a lot of it is all a similar theme.
Right. It is.
Even Undone, the sweater. I mean, the sweater is a metaphor for self-esteem,
Yeah, I guess.
presumably, or a symbol of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed so ridiculous at the time. There are some lyrics that I've heard this record so many times, and there are some lyrics that I just never knew what they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how I made sense of it, but just reading through them now, I realized that I would like familiarize myself with them phonetically probably more than I made sense of them. Like in My Name is Jonas, just like Grandma made.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I knew what that was, and it was when I couldn't find speed.
It's sleep, right?
Sleep, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I heard speed, and I thought it was like Dramamine, or I didn't know what he was talking about, but at some point I think I just sort of disassociated a meaning.
Yeah.
And just kind of heard what I heard, and like the lyrics just melded into the music, which is funny to read it now and realize that I've just forgot about figuring out what the meaning might be. And I've heard the record so much and never really knew. The acoustic guitar that comes out in the intro of My Name is Jonas and in a few other songs, In the Garage and The World Has Turned and Left Me Here, it feels like the exact same guitar and sound to me. It's just something I noticed, that listening through the whole record, it felt like at some point they had the acoustic set up and they opened up My Name is Jonas and played that little part, and then they opened up The World Has Turned and played that little part, and then In the Garage and played that.
Yeah, there's no reason to change it. It's just uniformity. It's consistent. A lot of the same drum sounds. Yeah. This record marked my performance debut as a teenager too.
Oh.
Actually, Say It Ain't So. We were at summer camp, and I think I was playing it electric though. Yeah, I was electric. Mm-hmm. We had a show at the end of summer camp, like a big concert. It was a sleepaway camp, and at the end of it, they would put on a big concert. They would build a stage, rent a huge PA system, and there was a house band, and people who attended the camp could sign up to sing a song. And I was in the house band. I was a guitar player.
Nice.
And it was a pretty big, they call it Camp Woodstock. It was Camp Canawan. It was a YMCA camp. And the song that I sang, aside from being we learned like 30 songs in a couple days.
Whoa, yeah.
Rehearsed them. And then the singer would rotate, like a new singer would come up for each one.
Right.
And that was the one that I sang.
Cool.
It's a big deal. And you know, that was the first taste I got of doing that.
Right.
Which was, it was cool.
Yeah,
I felt like I could own that song too. So it was like I really could own it. it was fine.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. And the rest is history.
Yeah.
So we talked about their career trajectory and how it seems like Rivers didn't have as much of a vision necessarily. Relating this to you and your music and your career, one thing that I've been struck by playing with you for a number of years now is your development. You seem to have a vision, and I don't mean necessarily that you picture an end goal, but you seem to be constantly changing, progressing. That seems to be something that you maybe strive for, or a goal. And maybe that sounds kind of obvious, but we're talking about a band who the opposite seems to be true. I know that some people are writing all the time, and some people sort of write in batches, and your process is more of a, when it's time to make an album, you sit down and work on a new batch of songs, and you're not necessarily constantly writing all the time. Is it something that's in the front of your mind to progress and move forward when you come to a new batch of songs? And if so, how do you make sure that you do that? It's kind of it's a big, broad question.
Yeah, I mean, no, but I know what you mean about it. It's actually not at all on my mind to do something different than before, and I don't necessarily feel like I've really reinvented myself per se on any of the different records, but I do hear a difference, I guess, if I were to play them back to back. I think it's just because I take the time in between to just live and follow different curiosities musically in terms of what I'm listening to.
Yeah.
Then by the time it comes time to make another record, I'm just in a different place than I was before. And then those curiosities just will come out in terms of how I've decided to play the guitar or piano differently, or how I want to add arrangements that are sonically different than the ones I was interested in before. Mm-hmm. I think it's just those kinds of leanings, and then even song structure and whatnot. I think that stuff just seeps in subconsciously over time.
Yeah.
And so I think it's good for me. I have some friends who are songwriters who were just writing all the time.
Yeah.
And who feel like a sense of validation if they do that. And it's not like that for me. I play all the time and I collect the musical ideas, but the writing, particularly lyrics, I usually write in a batch in a period of time over a few months when I'm getting ready to make the record. I finally kind of just play the ideas that have risen to the top. I just play them over and over again and then try to explore the imagery behind what I might want to write about.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, the difference for me compared to somebody like Rivers Cuomo, I think, is also that he fell into the trappings of having expectations for something that worked. And, I have no idea what that would feel like, because I've never had that. I never achieved that level of fame or success where people are expecting something of you. Not only fans, but the team of people around you. Everybody's expecting you to do something or hoping for you to do something.
Right.
I imagine that's confusing. And that's sort of one of the benefits of not having, reached such a broad audience, as you just follow your curiosity. And I don't know, it's easier for it to remain pure, I think, in that way.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as you were talking that through, that maybe Rivers hit a level of stardom that made it difficult, that you see with a lot of huge bands, that as the band goes on and on and on, the new albums aren't really the thing of interest, and it's probably hard to make any sort of major life changes at that time. I mean, not that I know, I have no idea what Rivers' life experience is like, but if you get to a point where you're not really going out in public, or you're playing tons and tons and tons of shows, and then you need a break from music, and then you need another album so that then you can go play tons and tons of shows again, that maybe that expression, that outlet that you needed at first, you don't really need it, or you're not really filling yourself up in between to then need to get it out.
I think so. I think the goal from the onset is different for different people too. You mentioned in your intro that I was known as an actor. I was never actually known as an actor. I was not known as an actor, and I did that work, kind of fell into that job,
Right.
and I got some work doing it. But I think that the intention for me in music, because of doing that work and never really feeling at home in it, when I started recording music and sharing it, the intention was I was so extremely protective of wanting it to be my pure expression.
Yeah.
And there was no goal to achieve success or fame or anything. And I was a little bit older when I started going after recording, or started doing it. So I wasn't quite as vulnerable in terms of having those kinds of, just those lighter aspirations,
Yeah.
So I think that makes a big difference. If you look back at the trajectory of bands or artists who have gotten where the message has changed,
Yeah.
I think you tend to see a bit of a slice of it in the beginning.
Right.
That they were after something,
Uh-huh.
They wanted to be famous. They wanted to be big. That was that was like 50% of it,
Right.
I've heard even people like Springsteen talk about that stuff. It was like he wanted to meet girls and he wanted to be famous, and that was a big part of what was driving them. It just so happened that he found a niche of songwriting that was a little bit more rooted in I guess his deeper emotions.
Yeah.
Arguably, I guess some people would would disagree with that. Depends if you're a Springsteen fan or not.
You either are or you really hate him, I think.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense that Rivers and Weezer achieved that goal very early on.
yeah,
And if the end goal is to be a rock star and just rock out and have songs to play and then new songs to play so you don't get bored, then mission accomplished.
I mean, a big part of it, I've met several bands where they tour, play big venues, and the purity of the pursuit is gone. You can just tell, not only from the music, but by talking to them. But the adrenaline rush of playing to many, many people and having them sing the songs, whether they're good or not,
Right.
is still very rewarding. And you can see it when they walk off stage.
Yeah.
They get a high from it. So it's like there's an incentive to keep churning it out, I think.
Right.
And you find a different kind of audience, but they exist nonetheless.
Yeah. I would be so interested to hear it from Rivers. I mean, I'm sure I definitely would not have the audacity to ask him about it, but he has to know. I mean, based on my childhood impression of him, I know nothing about him, but I know he went to Harvard and he was marketed as this very smart guy, and every indication is that he is smart. I'm not saying he's not, and that was only marketing. But I would just be so curious to know what his thought is on all that. If he's just gotten the fulfillment he wanted from music and the shows and the fans and the lifestyle, and it's been enough, and why would you take any kind of risks that might threaten that, and the fans will love him anyway.
But what if it's just the classic artist delusion where you just think you've always done your most recent work is your best work, because I've heard people talk about that before, and I actually have talked to other artists about it before, where they clearly believe that what they've just done it's fresh and it's where they're at, and it's the most meaningful thing that they've done. And you're like, dude, have you been listening to your own records? And then it's usually the earlier ones are the ones.
Right.
Like, even if you take people who are still, I guess, seemingly pursuing it in an earnest way, tends to be that the earlier records, they resonate more with people.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, not always.
No, I mean, there's a few. Well, I'm sure there's more than a few. There's a lot of people that are having long, really good careers. I'm just talking about huge, big names that come to mind, like Radiohead or Dylan, that they clearly put themselves in uncomfortable situations, or they're always striving, and that requires more effort than they need to put in from a financial perspective. It's clearly something that they want to achieve, and we love that about them.
Yeah, I think those types of people, it's really just because the curiosity still exists. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about Bob Dylan, but I know that he's still interested in creating things. Like, he paints and he does his welding and stuff.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's just still interested. The drive to create things and make art is in him. It's like still what is motivating him.
Right.
At least from an outsider's perspective, that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising to me that he would every once in a while, make something good.
Right. I just wanted to go back and say, in response to the question of whether Rivers has that artist illusion and thinks maybe he's still doing his best work. That's the other thing about this weird career trajectory of theirs, is that they seem to be really driving home that can't possibly be the case. To call your album Hurley after the character in the show Lost is...
Right, it's blatant.
It's blatant.
It's a joke.
Just clearly a joke. And then the covers album and using Weird Al. And I mean, it seems to be making it very clear that they don't think they're doing their best work. So it's just a strange thing to interpret. So I want to talk a bit about your new music. You said that you haven't reinvented yourself, and that's fair, but it does feel like, well, clearly each album is a different statement, different batch of music, but for me, being close to the music and having played on the last three, what's been striking, I think, or particularly noticeable in this new batch of songs, it feels like there's been a sort of ongoing process of emerging or giving more of yourself or being more direct. Thinking back to when I first started playing with you after your second record, Stray Ashes, came out. Like, for example, in your singing on that record, I didn't understand all the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
It felt a little more guarded somehow, and that's changed. I understand what you're saying. It's clear, it's direct now, especially in this new batch of songs, and it feels like it's been sort of an ongoing, sort of a development. I don't mean it to say it's gotten better necessarily. I just mean it feels kind of conscious. So, for example, on the new record, there's songs like Antelope Running and An Accident from Three Perspectives that, partly knowing you, I know some of the events of these songs, but your writing seems very clear in those. You're telling stories in those. Was it something you thought about, or a conscious decision to tell stories on this album? Because, I mean, I've always been a fan of your lyrics. They've always felt poetic and poignant to me, but there's something in the songs themselves, but also lyrically, it feels like you've been getting more direct. And does it feel that way to you? And is it a conscious decision?
I guess it does feel that way to me. It definitely wasn't conscious, but I guess the decision to go ahead with it was maybe conscious. Like on those two songs that you mentioned, for instance, I just had the images come up of specific events, days in my life that I remembered, and that I felt, for whatever reason, the headspace I was in, that I felt that they were compelling to write about.
Yeah.
And I remember, particularly with Antelope Running, the songs lyrically usually come to me quite slowly, and I write them over a period of days or weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes in a bit of a flood, but that one came in a flood because I was just writing from the image that I had in my mind of this particular event.
Yeah.
And I remember after it all came out, I was scrutinizing it quite a bit, and I was like, oh, this is too literal. Like, this is stupid. I shouldn't. Because it had a meaning to me, but I didn't know if it was going to come through.
Right.
I didn't know if it would register, like that, to share something banal that actually has a meaning underneath it. But so I think that the choice was maybe conscious to not shit on it too much and just put it in a drawer or something, and give it a little time and see if it would resonate with me if I played it a little bit later. come back to it, and I kept wanting to come back to those ones, so I felt I'd just give them a chance.
Yeah.
But I think I've always enjoyed different types of writing styles, like in artists that I admire. I love songs that are really vague and are more impressionistic, but I also love just straight up stories, if they're good ones and they're compelling and they're meaningful. So I don't know, not so much a conscious choice, but just maybe got bored of like being vague. Sometimes I start writing about something and then it becomes about something else, and then it has a meaning to me. But if I was trying to be objective and look at it, I would realize that it was kind of a vague picture of something that could be interpreted. And that's like one brush to use, but it's nice to have other brushes and other colors and different, different materials to fill in the picture.
Right. It certainly expands the palette. When I think of Stray Ashes, images come to me. I love those songs. I love that album. It doesn't feel like an older album necessarily. It stands next to these albums. I think it holds up next to the albums you've been putting out since. But it's not necessarily vague, but it feels image-based to me. The cover, the snowy house in the woods, the idea of the song Winter Ghosts, and the images in that song, just those images really permeate that record for me. And it's just striking with this new material that it feels like a listener can really stand next to you or even be in your perspective and get a very clear picture of what's happening. And I find it very gratifying and rewarding.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm glad it feels that way. It was actually that, like when I was making Stray Ashes, I was in a bit of a fog, and I recorded that one almost entirely alone.
Right.
It was that season. It was foggy. It was like, it was a deep solo endeavor, and I think I remember I was mixing the record and I shared it with people. My manager at the time was very critical of the vocal delivery because it was so vague, and I pretty much mumbled my way through that one, but that's how I wanted it at the time.
Right.
I don't usually listen back to my records, but I sometimes hear it playing, and when I hear that one, I'm like, yeah, that's true. It was true. I was really quite, like, I don't know, I was kind of standing back on that one.
It sounds intentional. That's what I was trying to say. I wasn't trying to say like, oh, you're a better singer now or something. It sounds intentional and sounds like a less direct approach. Like that's what you wanted.
Yes, exactly. And I think through also performing over the years and the last few years, especially where I've had to tour solo, the vocal delivery becomes a lot of what you have going for you. And when you play an hour set, you need to like relate something to people.
Right.
And I think that maybe subconsciously affected how, well, it consciously affected how I performed, and, became a bit more vocal forward in the live performances and maybe more articulate.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe realize subconsciously the reward of sharing in that way.
Yeah.
Not only for the audience, presumably, but also for me.
Right.
There was a completeness that I could feel in writing that way as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's all kind of, that's all how you get to that result. So some of those things.
Right. And so relating these sort of literal stories told in songs, like sticking with Antelope Running, which I love that song. I've just been thinking of it since we did the recording and heard the demos, and I love it. So if I'm trying to relate it to this Weezer album we're talking about, In the Garage is a song where Rivers Cuomo is also telling a kind of literally what he's just doing in the garage, like a clear picture of what he's doing in the garage.
Yeah.
They're very different songs, of course, but it just made me wonder about what I get out of hearing someone else's very specific story of their life. Like his song, it's very clear what he's trying to say. He's in the garage and he feels safe being in the garage and he can play his dumb songs. But he says that he plays D&D and he's listening to Kiss. These aren't things that I did. I've barely ever listened to Kiss in my whole life. It was never an important band for me. I never played D&D. It just makes me wonder, what is it about hearing someone else's story that makes it identifiable, that makes it compelling? It's a vague question, but some stories are successfully told and some are not. And usually a successfully told story is detailed, specific, something you can relate to, whether you were in it or not. It just made me wonder how that works.
Yeah, I think what it is ultimately is to be transported, you know. I think that's what films do at their best.
Mm-hmm.
They take you to another place that you don't know, and they give you a knowledge of that new thing. And at best, that they give you an emotional impression of that thing too. And that's, to me, what always been so compelling about cinema, is it like you can visit a country and stay there for a month and travel around and walk the streets and have a limited impression of what the culture is.
Right.
But you can watch a film that's, if it's a good film, that's set, you know, in that country or place and follows the life of a person who is intimately living in that space, and it can ultimately inform you more. You know, I haven't traveled every country for a month at a time, but I have sometimes learned more from those stories than from my observations. And I think that the same can be true with reading a book or, you know, in shorter form, a song. If it's a story that takes you somewhere, or even if it's just a mood that takes you somewhere, you know, the feeling, I think it's at best, music is escapist in that way, for me at least. It takes me somewhere I want to be.
Yep, I think that's it, actually, because there's some very specific things happening in Antelope Running that I feel like I can see, and it's like I'm there, but overall it gives this impression of being alone in this wide open world and touring, and it not only puts you in those very specific moments, but gives you a sort of broader impression of what the moments that are not talked about might be like for me. And it is escapist too, I guess, because it sounds pretty nice, especially in these times.
Well, there's also fantastic drumming on the track, you know.
Well, thanks. The song made it easy. It was such a nice thing to get to do. Lockdown in the year has been hard. The pandemic's been hard for everyone, but to be able to get away safely and work with you guys and be creative was so important.
Yeah, it was important to me to get it done during that time, and I'm glad we were able to pull it off.
Yeah.
It gives a little nugget of joy to the year, and it kind of helps put it on a little bit on a balance scale.
Yes.
You know, at least for me, because I was fortunate enough to not have had anybody around me get too sick or, you know.
Right. Me too.
It was, yeah, I think it was, I think I'll look back on it and be very happy that it happened, that we were able to do it this year and not have it delayed.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, I will look back on it as well, but also I felt it right in the moment. It was such a fulfilling experience, and
yeah,
there's been some beautiful moments in this time with family, getting more time with family, but from a creative perspective, it was just so important and helpful for me. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, my man.
So to close up on Weezer, if you had to choose between albums, what's their best record? In my mind, I won't hear any other arguments about any of their other albums except between this one and Pinkerton.
Between this one and Pinkerton?
Or if you think there's another one.
I think
if you think Hurley or the Green album or the Teal album is better.
Yeah, or the Teal album. I saw that one. Yeah, I didn't even comb through any of that stuff.
Right,
I watched a few videos of recent performances, and I gave me enough of a picture, I think.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
I think probably this is the better one of this between this and Pinkerton. Pinkerton is more interesting in terms of the song structures and sonically a bit more dynamic. But this, the Blue Album, I think is it's a really tight pop record, you know?
Yeah.
The songs are extremely catchy. The melodies are really easy to hold on to. And it has that exuberance to it.
Yeah, I think I agree.
So what it lacks in variety, I guess, it makes up for in being so sort of like bubblegumish, you know?
Right. Them being sort of like the Cars of our generation or something like that.
Yeah.
Having that impression of them. This record
Yeah.
fits that bill more than Pinkerton being a sort of transitional record into a transition that didn't happen, actually.
Right. That's a good way to put it, actually.
I think my favorite Weezer moments are on Pinkerton, but I guess this record feels like more of a complete statement that I can listen to. I don't love No One Else. I don't love Surf Wax America.
Yeah, that's my least favorite too.
But I guess this one feels like overall the best album. Tired of Sex is probably my favorite Weezer song.
Yeah.
I think Pinkerton has my favorite Weezer moments. There's some great, really unhinged moments on that album. I think that album kind of trails off for me a little more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the track list here. A lot of short songs, but it's like there's a lot of variety in terms of song length. Like Only in Dreams is 1 second shy of 8 minutes.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's pretty avant-garde for a pop record.
Yeah, it was impressionable for me back then, not knowing, just being in early bands and not knowing how to structure songs.
Yeah.
That showed me a way to kind of write an epic song without being able to do things that like Led Zeppelin could or Rush could,
Yeah,
in this song you just drop down to the bass line and then at the end have like a long drum freak out.
Right, it's like the accessible version of all of that. Right, it's like the more mainstream version. Like if you haven't gotten to that music yet, this was eye-opening.
Right, yeah.
And that's what I realized in retrospect is a bit of a bridge to more interesting stuff. Like if you were really into the singles and then you listen to Only in Dreams, it created an awareness in the listener that there are other ways to structure songs, and then, that I think that opened a door for me for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that song, like how it opens up again at the end.
Yeah.
So rewarding.
Yeah, it just seems so fun.
Yeah.
That was kind of the same as the video for Say It Ain't So. It was like, I just want to be doing that.
Yeah.
I remember when the Green album came out, seeing some quote from Rivers saying that he was trying to be like the Beach Boys in some way. I can't remember what he actually said. It was relating them to the Beach Boys or his efforts to the Beach Boys. And I remember thinking that was kind of surprising, and I don't think I knew much about the Beach Boys back then. I think I heard Kokomo early in life and kind of thought that that's what the Beach Boys were. So
yeah.
I didn't get them. I found out, I knew the history of the Beach Boys later, and so it's funny to listen back now and hear Surf Wax America and
Such
hear
a rip.
That's just a straight like early Beach Boys
kind
of rip-off song.
Did you think that this record was at all derivative of Nirvana and Nevermind?
I think it fit right in there. I mean, at first, like I said, it didn't really seem to.
Yeah.
Because of the sort of like nerdy, goofy aspects of them. Like Rivers just didn't seem like the tortured soul that Kurt and Eddie did.
Yeah.
But with the loud choruses and distorted guitars, it certainly hit the same kind of nerves as that music. I don't think I thought of them as rip-offs, but certainly they felt similar in a way, and that they were thriving off of that structure. You know, a lot of these songs have kind of like the verse and the chorus are the same thing.
Just play it louder.
Kick on the distortion.
Yeah, play it dirtier.
But yeah, I don't know if I appreciated it at the time, but there's certainly more sophisticated stuff on this record, like the solos and stuff are things that are beyond what Kurt would ever do.
Oh yeah, definitely. I guess the bass sound in Only in Dreams made me think of Nevermind, but I don't know. I think they thought of themselves as an alternative to grunge.
Yeah.
That was why they, I think, had a hard time getting going at first. That's what I read, at least, that they were playing shows and people wanted to hear grunge. They didn't want to hear they didn't want to hear what they were doing.
It seemed like in attitude only, really, because grunge songs overall are poppy as well. Like, I don't know, Alice in Chains or something. They didn't feel like they were listening to pop. Like, they had some weirder melodies and stuff.
Right.
But Nirvana and Pearl Jam, like, they're not poppy in attitude, but musically, songs are still pretty kind of poppy.
Yes.
Oh, one thing I meant to talk about was some of the drum fills on this album have stuck with me kind of throughout for some reason. Like, in No One Else, in that last chorus when he's answering sort of the I want to go da-da-da-da-da da-ga-dum-dum-da-ga-dum-da-ga-dum. Yeah, there are fills that are so musical. They've stuck with me at times when I want to play that, and I don't think I really even knew where I was getting it from. But listening back now, I was like, oh, I think some of that really seeped in. And then going back into the last chorus of Say It Ain't So, those really fast snare fills. So cool.
It's good. Those are the things that are still good about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to choose this record among the other ones that you had listed just because it evoked a more positive feeling. Some of the other stuff, I felt like the conversation would have gone into darker places. You know, because obviously you had the Nirvana Unplugged record on there, which is like, that was probably one of the biggest ones for me ever.
Yeah.
And along with the fact that it was filmed and the intensity of Kurt Cobain in that role, and how much I guess I felt a kinship with him in whatever way.
Yeah.
But you just go to different places and you start talking about those songs and what those songs meant to me, and the time in which I was listening to them is just a very different thing. This is brighter.
Well, that's great too. I mean, you know, my list keeps expanding because at first I thought that I would be making a lot of jokes and laughing about some of the ridiculous records that I used to listen to, and that can be some of it, but I'm just finding it more rewarding now to talk about positive things, songwriting, wherever, just letting things go wherever they go, and usually it's more conducive to conversation when it's positive.
Yeah,
stuff.
Exactly. I mean, there's a reason why you gravitate towards this stuff, right?
Yeah.
A certain age, just where you're at, makes you feel a certain way. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I mean, and it doesn't help me relate to it now so much, but thinking about No One Else, you know, it does capture a time for me, and that does seem successful in art. You know, if you can transport somebody back to a particular time in life, or if you can capture a time well that even if, you know, you can't relate to it as an adult. I mean, I guess I can't actually relate to the art itself either, really, and maybe that's why that one falls off for me now. But, you know, I don't know, a song like Jailhouse Rock, I can't relate to that, but it's still a great pop song.
Yeah. Funny example. The twist.
Yeah, it was on this morning because it's on Rowan's playlist. Well, thank you for doing this, my friend.
Thanks for having me, dude. I hope I was thorough enough in my research. I wanted to make sure that I got back inside of it. But,
I think you did. Was there any stuff that you thought about or wrote down?
It's ultimately what it is. That when I listened to it yesterday, that came out to me is just really juicy. It's really like there's a lot to grab onto. It's like it's immediate. It's present.
Yeah.
And it's fun, you know. It's like
Yeah.
it's one of those fun records.
It really is fun. Yeah. I think that's what I had a hard time getting my head around from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Way back when it came out, was that it could be fun. I mean, you know, I enjoyed listening to Nirvana and Pearl Jam, but it didn't feel like the songs were supposed to be fun. It felt like they were supposed to hit you over the head.
Supposed to demand something of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this doesn't really. It just gives it to you.
Yeah. So when you allow yourself, I think the videos helped with that. Like being able to laugh at those videos, or realizing, oh, this is cracking me up.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Back in the day, for me, the time it was that fuck it thing. It was like, oh, fuck it. Don't think about too much.
Take it too seriously. If you like it, great.
Yeah.
Listen to it.
Yeah.
And don't feel bad about it. And now, if you're listening to a new Weezer album, then do feel bad about it.
I'm
just throwing shade at my audience here.
Yeah.
Not really. Yeah, this has been really fun. Glad to finally get you on the show.
Thanks for the conversation, dude.
Almost forgot that we actually have another one in the can that will come out. I don't know what we said, but you and me and Dan talked about OK Computer live from the Isocon during the making of your album. I'm not sure when that'll come out, but sometime after this one.
Yeah, I remember being intimidated to talk about that one because of how profound the nerdism is surrounding that. And I even realized that doing a little digging around for this one, that exists also for this.
Yeah.
Guys on YouTube talking about guitar sounds.
Right, of course.
Backstory. The one thing we didn't talk about, which is very funny, is that apparently, you know, the guitar player was fired during the sessions for this at Electric Lady. His name was Jason Cropper, I think.
Uh-huh.
So he was fired. I read this somewhere online, apparently because his girlfriend got pregnant and he began behaving erratically.
I saw that too.
It was too much for him.
And he didn't realize that if he had just stayed in Weezer, everything would have been fine. He would have been rich and a rock star and could take care of that kid.
Right. He'd be gone for a little while, but things would probably have been okay. He couldn't keep it together.
Right.
And
then Rivers went back and recorded all
his guitar parts apparently, and then they got Brian Bell.
Right.
But I thought that was funny.
Yeah. Sad for that guy. I mean, I read something that he played with Rivers again in like 2016 and played some of these songs at a benefit. So I guess they're cool.
Right.
I'm sure he's
I mean, it just makes me think of like how bands are usually like a bunch of young people.
Yeah.
And they just have their emotional maturity is not yet that far along.
Right.
So the image of that just struck me as quite funny.
Yeah.
It's like big break, you know, getting signed to a big label and down at Electric Lady, and this guy gets a phone call. Just completely derailed.
Oh, God.
So it all slipped away.
And you think of rock stars like, oh, they made it. They're all good. But there's also all that life stuff happening.
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised to hear that Rivers went back and re-recorded all his stuff in a day, because that sort of goes back to that everything sounding samey, and it sounds like they probably just opened up every session with the same guitar and same
sounds
amp,
like he was steering the ship anyway for the most part.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that guy's happy and got a healthy kid.
Totally. Yeah. I guess that kid might have a kid at this point. That is the show. That episode was brought to you by the word struck. I use it a lot. Thanks so much to Jesse for doing that with me. That was a lot of fun. Happy birthday to him once again. I'm sure he'll be announcing his new album before long. I'm excited for people to hear it. I had a wonderful time working on it with him and Logan Cole and the great D. James Goodwin. Jesse has tour dates in Europe in September and October. They're set up. That is assuming things go well with the pandemic. Check out his website, for that information. One joke that I forgot to make was that the conversation at the beginning of the Sweater Song with the guy talking about, hey, that's so great. Yeah, kind of sounded like Jesse's former bassist and our good friend Andrew Carlson after a show trying to have a conversation with Jesse. Jesse's always stoic, partly because he hasn't eaten for 15 hours or something, trying to get to a burrito joint at 1:30 a.m. and Carlson's always jacked. The excitement of playing made me laugh. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review it if you can. Apple Podcasts is great for that. Spotify, wherever. Hey, if this gets a whole bunch of listens and retweets and stuff, maybe I'll try convincing Jesse to cover Say It Ain't So once again with the band once we're all playing again. And you know what? If it gets a whole lot of attention, I'll work on him trying to get him to cover the whole album of Hurley, or maybe just to listen to it for a second. Weezer's 14th album, as I understand it, is out today as well. It's called OK Human, and OK, seriously, just tweet these ideas, maybe, or leave them in your Twitter drafts. You do not need to write and record a whole album to make an OK Computer joke. Thank you. Next episode will be with Caitlin Demaray. You probably know her. She is indie rock royalty from the band Rainer Maria. Hey, if you don't know him, listen to him. Read the poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke. Amazing. She's a good friend. She's a great artist. She has a new album coming out, and it's beautiful. And we talked about that, and we talked about Portishead's Dummy. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you soon. Bye.